Thank you all for coming. Appreciate taking your time out of the visit of this amazing fair with all this art. And just before lunch, and I know I'm the last thing between lunch now, to come and listen to our talk about the textile, fashion, and art crossover through history. So I'm Jean-Michel Dumont, the Secretary General of the Society, an organization which is aiming at bringing Asia closer to France and to the European Union. And so through this fair and through this conversation, we're going to see that Asia is really, an important part of our culture, the way we have developed and so on, and will continue being so. You've seen clearly when you visited the fair a lot of link with textile. This is one of the things. There are amazing pieces of ikat, and one of the artists should be popping up later to introduce her work, the one who has all the beautiful ikat in the staircase. So this is, we're going to have in this conversation two people with me who are here, and two are online designers representing Asia from India to Lebanon. I'm not sure they see you, but everybody is waving at you. Okay. I want to very quickly introduce the people which are here, so you know who is talking about what. First, Aurélie Samuel, who is here, heritage curator, and I'm going to say very quickly because I know I've got less than 5 minutes, and I'm at two. Okay. She's worked at the Musée Guimet as head of the textile department, and I'm going to read these, before joining the foundation Pierre Berger, Yves Saint Laurent, for the opening of the Yves Saint Laurent Museum, for which she organized a permanent tour and the exhibition L'Asie rêvée d'Yves Saint Laurent in 2018. Author of numerous books and scientific articles, she has curated several exhibitions, including Tsutsugaki, Tissu japonais teint à l'indigo in 2013, Juno à Matahari, 2015, Intérieur coréen, Kimono au honneur des dames, et Kabuki, costume from Japanese theater. And she, more importantly, currently has an amazing exhibition in Marseille. I know there are things happening outside of Paris. Called Fashion Folklore, which is really good. She will be the main moderator of this discussion. Then next to me is Sylvie Marot, who is a specialist in fashion heritage, exhibition, and museum curator. Former responsible for the textile collection and first world collection of ribbons in the Art and Industry Museum. Former curator of Marité and Françoise Girbeau heritage. She's curated many exhibitions within the framework of Saint-Étienne International Design Biennale. Her last exhibition, The Art of Lace, at the International Lace and Fashion Museum in Calais and the Textile Museum of Tilburg, Netherlands, underlined the link between lace manufacturers and fashion house. Her catalogue, Anne Valérie H. des Crayonnés, was awarded the 2017 Grand Prix du Livre de Mode. She also wrote a book on Le Kohanet Hemant, which I'm going to introduce now because Hemant Sagar, who is online, is a renowned fashion designer and co-founder of the Indo-French fashion house Le Kohanet Hemant, which he created in 1980. Born in New Delhi of a German mother and an Indian father, you're in the microphone. Hemant spent, of an Indian father, Hemant spent his childhood in India. He pursued his passion for design and dressmaking and embarked on a successful career in the fashion industry. With a strong foundation in couture from the École de la Chambre syndicale de la couture parisienne à Paris, Hemant's works reflect a unique blend of Indian and French aesthetics. He created an ecological collection in the 90s and established iOrganic, a brand wholly dedicated to sustainable practice, incorporating eco-friendly material and ethical production methods. He's been recipient of highly respected awards, including Le Dé d'Or, the Swarovski Creation Prize and Designer of the Year in Miami. And the work is exhibited at Victoria and Albert Museum, as well as Musée des Arts de la Mode à Paris. Quite impressive. And then we're going to another part of Asia with Salim Azzam, the founder and creative director of his brand, but he's a Lebanese visual storyteller and illustrator. He has a master's degree in visual communication design from the University of Alberta in Canada. His brand is inspired by his upbringing in Lebanon and his culture of the shoe, where emblems of natures and stories of his upbringing reoccur in his design. Salim was awarded the prize of Fashion Trust Arabia in 2019 and has dressed royals, notably Queen Rania of Jordan. And he has a dream to preserve and share the craftsmanship of artisan community in Mount Lebanon. Started his brand to channel the creativity of women who take pride in their work and the knowledge of their powers to share the gift with the world. And now works with 60 artisan women. That will be it. And I have to admit that I've not prepared a presentation for you because, yes, everybody has seen your work at the entrance of the fair. But maybe you want to say 2 words about yourself.
Well, I call myself an accidental designer because first I fell in love with the handloom textile, ikat, which is mostly woven in Central Asia, Uzbekistan. Tajikistan and Uzbekistan they were one country, and then Stalin divided it. So now Uzbekistan has the best weaving workshops in Farghana Valley, which is called the Silk City. But also there is ikat produced in Japan, also in Thailand, in Indonesia, and also in, where else? Cambodia, and India, of course, India. So first I see the textile, and then I design something around it. Like you see, Uzbek ikat normally has very large and bold patterns. So I make long coats because you cannot cut the pattern. So you have to respect the dignity of the design and the panel. And I'm fascinated with the patience and the dedication of the artists who take so much time to weave these materials, because first they tie-dye and then they color the threads, the silk threads, and then they weave it. So the painting, the drawing is done on the threads, and then it is woven. And it takes a long time. And in India, they always say, in order to be an ikat weaver, you have to know how to meditate, because you have to be a really patient person. And this is a kind of fabric that people respected highly. Like in Uzbekistan, when a family has a daughter, they start collecting high quality ikat, silk ikat, or they call it adras, as a dowry for their daughter, because it's so precious. In India, they said the kings wore ikat, and especially double ikat, when they went to the temple to pray. So this shows that how much respect people have for the fabric. So I think that's a very short introduction of my love for ikat and why I love this textile so much. And it breaks my heart when we cut them.
It was a perfect introduction. Thank you, thank you.
You can develop after, but I think you have introduced all the most subjects we will see today. Just to start, we wanted to explain how India has influenced fashion. And in France, the Indian's imaginary especially was based on the interpretation of the myth. As you can see on this slide, you can establish the link between Lakshmi, undulated by elephants, and the famous photography of Avedon with the 2 elephants. I think it's quite amazing. As you can see also on this slide, because you can see the link between Yves Saint Laurent 1965 dress and the position of the woman in the Ajanta caves. So it's my opinion, but I think it's quite clear. I don't know, what do you think about this? And this fashion of India first began with Paul Poiret you know, the famous designer at the beginning of the 20th century. And first it comes from the sari, the assumed textiles worn adorned all around the body. And then the pyjama, that you can see the pyjama that come from the pyjama from the Mughal art of India. I think so. Maybe, Hemant, you want to add something?
Actually,
No?
It's such a historical movement.
Yes? Sorry?
It's a historical movement that actually started with the Doga even earlier. So and I would call it a kind of universal logic to take a piece of material and to wrap it around your body.
Mm-hmm. But
So I think it's a simple start for a beautiful history.
it cut a little bit when you speak, but I think we understand.
It is a simple start.
Yes.
It's a simple gesture for a very beautiful long history of textile.
Mm-hmm. But it's interesting to notice that one of the first influence comes from this sari. It's a very typical Indian garment that it's not really easy to wear in Europe. So just to show you, Paul Poiret, of course, Deuillet, and in 1935, the sari climax was reached, and all the designers wanted to imitate India. You can see here 3 examples from Paul Poiret to Yves Saint Laurent through Christian Dior that reinterpret the role of the sari, and especially with the use of the turban. As you can see here also with the interpretation of pyjama by Yves Saint Laurent. You can see also with Marc Bohan, who was the successor, of Christian Dior, who worked on the botte, who is a stylized ornament of cashmere shawl. So that's interesting because we can see all this influence in all the history of fashion. And we thought maybe that this fashion of that comes from Le Bal Oriental. It was a ball organized by Le Baron de Rédé, who was a very influenced person in the 60s. And this ball was dedicated to India. And after this event, Yves Saint Laurent created 20 years after the Indian collection in 1982. John Galliano, of course, reinterpreted the adorned body because he was particularly interested in that the question of how body is an ornament in India and not only something to wear clothes. Chanel, of course, with the collection of métiers d'art dedicated to Paris and Mumbai, and Jean-Paul Gaultier, of course. And here we can see what I think an event quite interesting because Yves Saint Laurent organized a fashion show in Mumbai in 1989, and Maria Grazia Curie for Dior made this also in 2023, and she established a link very special with India with a collaboration with the Chanakya workshop, and it was quite new because it's dedicated to craftsmanship and a collaboration with this particular center of traditional textiles. So all in this history we can see that the designer was inspired by brocaded textiles, of course, by Jamdani textile with the muslin, and with the embroidery named Sadosi, but also the embroidery comes from Gujarat and Rajasthan. Another example, I think it was quite interesting to see, is an Hermès silk carré inspired by the Kanta of Bengal, a very popular embroidery. So today, working with these textiles also means preserving the know-how. And I leave Sylvie Marot.
And it's a... Oui, oh, ben c'était parfait. Petite organisation juste de... Voilà. Oups, oui, un peu. Attends, j'ai peur que ça sweep.
C'est bon?
Ouais, sorry. Okay, thank you. Before handing over to Hemant live from New Delhi, I'd like to briefly present the bread. First of all, thank you for giving us the opportunity to revisit the history of local enamel, as fashion as a short and selective memory sometimes. It seems that we have forgotten that Le Hemant fashion house has created 33 haute couture collections dating from the early 80s to 2000 that have contributed to the history of fashion. However, despite a lack of exposure, last year was rich in events for Le Hemant, an exhibition in the Lace Museum in Calais, a catalogue, and a book. What a tribute. So, I first had the pleasure of writing for the catalogue of this exhibition entitled Les Orientalistes de la Haute Couture. I don't know the translation in English, but I suppose it's understanding. And thereafter was honored to collaborate with Hemant on a book relating their career between Paris and New Delhi. Indeed, in 81, the Frenchman Didier Le Cohanet and the Indian-German Hemant Sagar merged their names to found their fashion house. 3 years earlier, they met at the Chambre Syndicale de la Haute Couture in Paris. Yes, you can next. From the outset, she shows haute couture. The choice of haute couture may seem audacious, but let me remind you of the context. During the 80s, trendsetters tended to be designer or stylist. Haute couture was a bit on a decline. As a reminder, haute couture was based on a fixed system of 20 or so members, including Christian Dior, of course, Yves Saint Laurent, Givenchy, and so on. So, Le Hemant soon preceded the revival of haute couture with Karl Lagerfeld. Karl Lagerfeld arrived at Chanel in 83 and Lacroix in 87. Let's get back to Didier and Hemant, most important here for the moment. They are both definitely multicultural and nomadic. These citizens of the world were first and foremost enamored with India and Asia. India is Hemant's homeland and a place of discovery for Didier. I'd like to share an anecdote with you, which seems fundamental for me. The very first Didier Le Hemant trip was to India in 73. L'Inde remue, l'Inde secoue. In English, India will move you and shake you. Read this travel guide from the Routard series, which was founded that same year. The theme of haute couture, the themes of haute couture collection reflect this desire for adventure. The first fashion show is called Zen. Then we have Mousson, La Louisiane, Un hiver mongol, Chan, La route de la soie, Retour d'Égypte, Un hiver de jade, Sur les traces de Gengis Khan, Parfum de voyage. Voilà. I take my paper. Oops. Thank you. So, Le Hemant, the brand, gave us ways of seeing somewhere else. Be it distant lands or the ocean floor, from the Shalimar Garden to the Gobi Desert. They offered us journeys through space, time, and dimensions. The far away or beyond. Completely indifferent to ethnicity, this pluralist tendency was obvious in their unique ornamentation, sari-inspired skirts, and the originality of their materials. For Didier, next if you want, next after. Yeah, next. Yeah. For Didier, as a Frenchman, exoticism was embodied by a woman in a sari placing an offering of flowers before an Hindu god. While for Hemant, it was a woman seated outside a cafe in a beautiful tailored suit showing glimpses of her stocking-clad legs. Hemant said to me, when I arrived in Germany, I discovered that women had legs. In India, wearing saris, they don't. Their exotic vision led them to combine coats made from Ottoman fabric, kimono sleeves with hidden bustier, and skirts above the knee. Thus, between East and West, Le Hemant invited us on a journey where an explosion of color, a mischievous spirit, a poetry, odes to other lands, sculptural drapes and couture series, asymmetry and gravity-defying patterns, opulence and rarely used material are found. To conclude, the story has two chapters. There were first the Orientalistes à Paris, the Orientalists of Paris, and since are les Parisiens de l'Inde. I will now hand you over to Hemant because I think it's better if you are talking about your work. Thank you. Micro to Hemant.
So it's to me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, all of this, I couldn't understand everything because of the voice, and I will speak slowly so that you can hear me. We actually came to India with our cultural baggage of the haute couture, but mainly the cultural baggage. And we landed in an adventure of a country where we wanted to find an amalgamation of our own culture and, of course, of what is acceptable to the culture here. So since then, we are not doing haute couture, but we feel it is in the spirit very similar to the haute couture, although it's totally different and it's 20 years later. So here it has become a kind of exotic collection in India, which we call created in Paris and cultivated in India. Basically, we're kind of bringing a bit of a French style to India, which is exactly the contrary of bringing the Indian style to France. And in fact, we feel that we are very much on the bridge between the two styles. And Le Guanéma has become a kind of a bridge collection between haute couture and pret-à-porter, but also between the cultures of different countries. So I would say it's the cultural travel that just continues, and it's becoming a kind of always from the other side. In India, it's French, and in France, it's India.
Another way of safeguarding textile is to collect them, of course. And it's quite important because the first inspiration went from collecting. For example, in France, and I know Hemant, you knew her because you told me that, Krishna Ibu was a very important woman. She was a native of Bengal, and she began her collection in the 50s. And she wanted to document the Balucha sari, because she realized they were in the process of disappearing. And you can see on the slide the first piece of the collection that was a sari of Mursidabad. She founded an association of study and documentation of Asian textiles, and she decided to give all her collection to Guimet Museum. That was the point of the creation of a textile section, and it was quite important, incredible, and the first textile of this importance in a French museum dedicated to Asian art. And one thing very important is she wanted to give her collection to a general fine arts museum rather than a textile museum, because she considered that textiles were major art, exactly as painting, sculpture. And this really particular thing of view was quite new, especially in France. And to India itself, a collection was formed, and especially this one made by Praful and Shilpa Shah, the Tapi collection, with a large part of history of old textiles. And another important collector is Leka Podar, who has founded the Devi Art Foundation, and this foundation allows contemporary artists to watch all these traditional textiles and can be influenced by them. So among this collector, we have a very specific of them, as you can see here, and want to display also contemporary artists, as Chandrasekhar Beda, for example, who treat very specifically the weaved and weft of textiles, or Ajit Kumar Das, who were the specialist of kalamkari. You know maybe what is kalamkari? It's dyed block print or designed by Kalam. You know the bamboo pencil, exactly, pencil in bamboo, and the kalamkari was a specialty of South India, and he decided to renew these very specific textiles of kalamkari. You can see on this picture what is kalam. And to show also the artists of Asia now, because as we can see, there are several artists who were inspired by their traditional culture, especially Ikat, as Bruno Mukazanova. who really use this very particular effects of flow, you know, to show the culture in globalization, that a kind of mixture. And of course, your work. So I think you are the best to talk of your work. Maybe can I quote you when you say that the iCat fabric I use is the star, and I'm the supporting actor. I don't decide until I see the fabrics, their texture, the way they move, the meaning of each their motifs. They are the elements that dictate the design and ultimately how I express myself.
It is very true. You know, most of our clients, they always contact us, what is new? Our design is not about new. It's about something timeless. And you buy one piece that goes from one generation to another. It's not about disposable art. It's not about disposable fashion. It's about really slow fashion, and these are like a statement piece. So I always tell them, and our sales manager always fights with me, said, don't tell them to buy only one piece. Because that's why I tell my client, just buy one piece, because they're expensive. But this is a statement piece, and it will last in your closet, and whenever you wear it, it's gonna look something fresh and like as if you just bought it today. So, but it is true, because I was a journalist. I worked as a war correspondent for 25 years. But I grew up with a grandmother who was a collector of textile. My grandfather was from Georgia, my grandmother from Baku, so I have the Central Asia connection. But I lived in the US for a long time. I went to American University, I became a journalist. But every time I traveled to Yemen, to Lebanon, to Uzbekistan, to Afghanistan, I always looked for textile, and I bought antique textile, collected. And 12 years ago, I went to Uzbekistan just to go to Samarkand and Bukhara. These are the cities that you only think it exists in an imaginary world, in poetry. But when I went there and I discovered ikat, and I saw with my own eyes how they weave them, I madly fell in love with ikat, and I bought a suitcase full of ikat. I came back, I made a few pieces for myself, and then all my friends, they wanted to have it. And that's why I say I'm an accidental designer. Then my journalistic background helped me a lot to search and investigate, to find the best weavers. Like in India, I'm sure this gentleman in India knows, there is a Salvi family in Ahmedabad that they've been weaving double ikat since the 11th century. So I did a lot of investigation to find them, to go there. And so it is like a learning process. I'm constantly learning, and it is true. If we have material, we make something. If we don't have material, we don't make anything. And we don't tell them, we are in touch with the designers directly. Like one of the most important ikat designer is Rasul Jan in Uzbekistan, because the velvet ikat was a dying technique. Nobody was making velvet ikat because it's very difficult. And the government or the private sector was not supporting these weavers. And Rasul Jan, who is a very traditional textile ikat designer, he revived velvet. And I was like going mad to find this man. So I went from one city to another city to another city. And finally I found him. And sorry. I found him in Fargana, which is the silk city of Uzbekistan. And he the same thing. He doesn't have like 100 meters of the same fabric. They have only 20 meters, 30 meters of ikat. And then they produce different design. And even if they repeat the same design, it's never the same, because the color, the dyeing is done by hand. They mix the color by hand. It's not like computerized. You don't go to like hardware store and do the color by computer. It's done by hand. That's why every time when they repeat the same design, the color is always different. So for me, anything is done by hand. I highly respect that. And our team, they're all Indians, because Indians are the masters of working with their hands for the embroidery. Our master tailor is an Indian. So it is a long process of learning and learning.
Thank you. And I'm sure Sally is agreed with that. So fashion gives a different vision of this tradition. and gives new life to the local craft, as we can see in the work of the Lebanese designer Salim Azzam, who will introduce his work.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me. So my stories with craft started at a young age. I literally had to go nowhere. I just looked around me. I was always surrounded by women in the corner of every room doing crochet or knitting and using craft as a way to express themselves. Like on the second slide, you would see like literally our homes were covered by all these like handwork that was mainly within the display context, not within the wearable context. But for years, these women kind of used those crafts to not just express themselves, but express a lot of family and cultural affiliations. When a newborn when there's a newborn, celebration of life, marriages, and all these kind of things. With the changes in time, economical crisis, a lot of factories kind of put those crafts on the side. And as a designer who was not impassioned, but using design practice to focus on social change and human needs, I wanted to go back to this huge community of artisans who are in their 60s, in their 70s, just like not practicing those crafts as a way to make a living anymore, but just more for the fun of it. I wanted to do something about it. And I was like, what if we remove that craft out of its original context and put it on wearable pieces and allow fashion to do that? Honestly, it was like a moment of like a community of people come together to say, what if we challenge one another? And you will see on the next slide how it all started. So I've used my illustrative background, picturing things. Yes, this one. Picturing things from my childhood. So all my illustrations were fruits, lots of oranges and lemons. Like I grew up in that mountain, and you will see a lot of those in our work, and then those kind of like became the code of the brand. So all these women started shifting their mindset from display to wearable pieces, and the stories that were coming throughout all these kinds of pieces that we are producing. If you can go 2 slides forward. So I started off with 3 women, and then the more I started digging and researching and looking to the history of the craft, we started to introduce more women to the team and challenge ourselves. Like on the left, you would see like a piece that is not just inspired by a Canva approach, but mimicked in an embroidery approach. But you'll see also the motifs are very representative of that mountain, of the red Lebanese rooftops. On the second slide, I wanted to show you other references of different crafts. Like on the right, you will see the smocking technique, which is the gathering of fabric that was originally put on the marriage pillows, one in pink and one in blue. So taking that and making a coat out of it. And also on the one on the left, there was this huge influence of a German magazine called Birda that was translated into Arabic and sent to the region, and the women kind of took something out of it. So when I designed that collection, it was an ode to that that way of working with the craft. It's just honestly fascinating to see on the second slide how we were able throughout those couple of years to push the craft and to challenge those women while respecting like the heritage and all these stitches, but allow ourselves to use those crafts to serve a story of a specific collection. And as I ask you to move to the second slide, I would love to say that not just that the brand is focusing on the craftsmanship, but every single aspect of it is so authentic to where we come from. So on the second slide, I decided to show you one of the collections, which is, we like to call them chapters in the house. So it's a black and white collection that pays tribute to the customary dress of all these women who wear white and black as a representation of purity. And all these illustrations that are very much representative, taking those crafts and pushing them and putting them in a modern and a kind luxury, ready-to-wear approach. If you can go to the next slide, you will see like every single time I actually wanted to work with these crafts, I wanted them to look within a fashion context and not just like something on display. So like taking a tablecloth that is crochet and making a rabbit mask out of it to fit the context of that, or even the skirt with like the changing of the sizes of it. Like all these techniques that are being used in that context. And within those like years of practice, preserving the craft and building awareness around it has been a very key thing for the brand. On the second slide, you will see the workshops that we've been using and doing throughout like those 6 years of practice. We have grown the team from like a small group of women to a lot of people showing interest in this beautiful form of art and having young people wanting to come and learn this sort of craft. And honestly, it brings me so much pride. You will see on the last slide that I wanted to share is like how big the family is becoming. It's like a full-on women operation, but not just only craftsmanship. Like I have built this manufacturing system in the region where we also have to teach women how to tailor so that we can all come together as a community and do everything in-house. So yeah, that's my story with craft.
Thank you very much. It's really an emotional project, no? Thank you. So maybe we wanted to ask to each participant some question, but maybe the audience has, so don't hesitate. we can start to launch the discussion, but...
We would like it to be a vivid discussion, so go ahead.
I have a question, actually. So, at the start, you were speaking more about the... Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I speak quite loud, so...
Yeah, but it's taped, so...
Oh, right. Got it. Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so at the start of the discussion, we were speaking more about the intersection between French and Indian fashion, sort of like a fusion of culture and the beautiful ideas that come of it. Last year, for example, there was in polémique a controversy when Dior had a skirt that looked a bit like Chinese traditional skirt, and it was called cultural appropriation. And so I want to ask you, where do you draw the line, and how do you sort of manage this? Because part of it is maintaining the tradition, but part of it is new ideas.
It's a very good question.
Love.
This is absolutely...
That is the question, actually.
Yes, that is the question. And you know, as Jean-Michel said, I have just opened an exhibition in Marseille, which is quite the subject. The link between tradition and creation. And we were wondering with my co-curator how we have to manage this problem of reappropriation. And it's why we decided to make this subject the subject of the exhibition, and to show that when you are inspired and you pay a tribute and you recognize where come from your inspiration, it's not a reappropriation. I think the problem came when you copy exactly at the same way. You don't recognize where does it come from, and I don't want to accuse someone, but it was exactly what happened. It happened with Dior, with Dior J'adore. Maybe you know this history. They came to Romania. They copied exactly absolutely, and they sold it. Very expensive, of course, because it was haute couture and ready to wear, and they never want to recognize the inspiration. That is reappropriation.
That's why the hashtag give credit.
Absolutely, absolutely, you saw that. But it's quite different when it's an inspiration, exactly as an artist do. You know, when a painter have an inspiration come from Africa or Asia, nobody say to him it's reappropriation. But the thing is to recognize that and to pay a tribute to that and to try to create a collaboration with. This is my opinion, but maybe you want to add something.
Yes, exactly
maybe
the same.
I too.
Exactly the
Just
same.
give credit.
Yes.
Just mention where it is coming from.
Absolutely.
I think it's as simple as that.
There is an exhibition currently now at the 19M
Yes.
à Aubervilliers. It's not from Asia because we are talking about collaboration with Mexico, Mexican artisan, but I think it's a good way to illustrate what is appreciation cultural and not appropriation cultural. So it's a collaboration between an artist, is Carla Fernandez, I think so, and a lot of many ravers and artisans, and we will see a real appreciation of a culture and a tribute. So yes, the difference is appreciate and appropriate. It's diametrically opposite concept. So yes,
If I may add something, we need to look at it from the historical perspective. I mean, we're talking, for example, of the clothes from Romania, but then they themselves are a result of cultural exchanges. And so it's always in history. And what influences us today will be creating something new that will influence the future. So it's really, as opposed to stopping time, looking at continuation. Maybe.
But also the thing, I have a problem with exotic. Because exotic is a completely Western point of view. Whatever is not Western, if it is African or Central Asian or Indian, is exotic. But for them, that is not exotic. For Indian, creating these beautiful saris and hand embroidery is not exotic. I think we cannot just generalize it and say these are all exotic. It's like Muslim world. Muslim world is so diverse. It's so, Indonesia is not Saudi Arabia. It's very diverse. You cannot. I think the tendency to generalize is because we want to simplify to understand it. I think there is a good intention behind it. But at the same time, I think it becomes a little bit condescending. It is not a black tiger in Bangalore that's exotic. These people have been doing this for centuries. It is not something exotic. It is different. So different is something. But again, Oscar de la Renta, I think in late 90s, he did the entire collection with ikat. And he mentioned that this is ikat from Central Asia. Then fast forward, Oscar de la Renta, last year they did the Mughal embroidery of Rajasthan, and they never gave credit. They did the same thing with Mexican embroidery to the point that the government of Mexico had to protest. So this is unethical, I think. But if you give credit, I think there won't be any difference.
I think about one thing, because in haute couture or in high fashion, we have a tradition of haute nouveauté. It's a textile, absolutely expensive, exclusive, etc. But I'm really interested by the way of Le Coin Hemant chose their textile, because you have two sort of ideas. You pay expensive, or you pay a travel and you try to find another fabric, maybe an exclusive fabric, but just maybe it's not expensive, but you found it in other country. And maybe you can explain where you find your inspiration. And Hemant, I talk to you. And maybe you can explain more, the process of creation and to find something luxurious things, but not expensive things.
Well, we make a big distinction between haute couture of actual work and haute couture of the spirit. And the haute couture of the spirit is, I think it's something that Salim is doing also. It's a way, it's an approach of looking at things. It's the path of the interpretation is the richness, right? And I think that it's a very important thing of what you give, and if in the end it's costing $100 or $10,000 or $1 million, is a different story. But according to how much attention you give it, it will have that allure. And I think it's very important to know exactly what Madame was saying, is where you come from, and that you give it a kind of a credit, and you say, well, this is my inspiration, and this is where I'm taking it, and that's where it really becomes interesting.
Salim, you want to add something, maybe?
Yeah, I feel like I always tell people, if it's not within your budget, that doesn't mean it's expensive. There is so much soul, an hour of work put into the craftsmanship of a piece. And it's not that I chose that I wanted to do luxury fashion. It's just like the craft dictated luxury. The hours of work, putting women in the forefront, being fair and highlighting them, not just financially, but also giving them credit and putting them on social. And that comes with a price, And I think it goes back to you speaking about a timeless piece. You're buying an investment piece that you'd keep in your closet and give it to somebody. It would still have meaning. So yeah, that's what I have to say. And you will always have clients. You will always have your niche who would appreciate and know what they're buying, and they're conscious consumers as well. So I think it's a very interesting subject.
We work with a big circuit of Afghani refugee women here in India, and it sounds similar to what you were doing.
Yeah, amazing.
Maybe another question?
That was the mother of all questions.
Yes.
No, I have a question for Hemant because Hemant, you have created a very specific clause linked to the Ayurvedic medicine, and I wanted you maybe to explain what is this collection, because I'm sure nobody knows that.
It's actually, it is a treatment, and we find traces of this, which is called Ayur Vastra. Ayur is health and universe, and Vastra is clothes. So it goes back about 5,000 years that you take mostly cotton material and you imbibe it into many, many different herbal solutions, boilings, aloe vera crystal treatment, 152 different herbal procedures over 2 weeks, including exposure of the material into the sunshine or in the moonshine or in the dry. And it ends with the last rinse of this material in the river, in the natural river, and all the fishermen are praising the herbal solution because it is making the fish population much bigger. So just to give you the whole universal outlook of this one collection, so it's called Ayurganic. And it's organic cotton that does not exist so far, because until now people would just bring some cotton, but the certification of it by GOTS, which is the Global Organization of Textiles, has approved this procedure, and we have made it into this collection which is called Ayurganic. And for us, it is a certain kind of an haute couture, even if it is the 100% contrary of haute couture, because haute couture is about it's about prestige, and it's about level making, and it's about impressing. Whereas this collection is about coming back to your temple or your body and accepting it as your home, and that is where you go to, and you put on this material onto you, and you light a candle, and you just go inside.
I'm sorry, I have no picture about Ayurganic, because actually there is nothing to see. It's inside.
No,
so
nothing at all.
Sorry. Haute couture is prestigious. And,
but the feeling is quite unique, and what we say is that your skin is the biggest organ of your body, and you also breathe through your skin. So that is the justification, is that it will enhance your metabolism. Of course, materials like this, you don't boil them. You wash them at 40, and you don't wash them more than 40 or 50 times, because you just wear them as much as you can and only rinse them with water, because all the natural resination stays in it, and it's really quite fascinating. And when you see all these artisans in Kerala doing it, it's really quite amazing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I've got a question also to both Salim and Hemant, actually. But clearly, you're taking some inspiration from heritage and from the past, and creating something new. But why do you think it's essential today to preserve patrimonial heritage?
I think it's because it's a big part of your identity and who you are. And I think, like, I always say that the best way to go global is to be authentic and true to who you are and have a unique point of view. And I think, like, when you highlight something and you from a specific area or from a specific culture, and you bring it, and you have so much pride in it, you want to share it. It's part of who you are. It's part of your identity, and I think it conveys so much about who you are as a person. So I think it's very, very, very important also for diversity, for all of us to come from different places and share our heritage and make it modern and respect it. So I think it's super important.
I find it very interesting in these parameters to look at it as if it is so connected to your person that you can't even distinguish it. And you don't even say it's beautiful, it's just okay.
I totally agree with these two gentlemen, because for me too, it's like an interrogation of my own identity.
Yeah.
Finding, because I belong to so many cultures and I don't know which one is mine, and all of them are mine. So for me, is also delving into this, and the textile is a vessel to take me there. and to help me a little bit to understand and come to terms with it. Thank you. So I want to say something because we have one moment. I want to ask our Indian gentleman, Hemant. I think India is the only country in the world that has a textile minister. Is it true?
Yes.
Oh, we have one in each country. Yes, I'm dealing with a couple of them. But I would like to say is what I personally feel is that India has got itself anchored a little bit too much into tradition, and we are forgetting that there are millions, if not even billions, of young women who have so many saris left over from their mothers that they will not buy a single new one. And there are millions of sari weavers making more and more and more. And we wonder what is going to happen. And it would really be a big favor for the whole textile world and for all the consumers to see something happen with these materials that actually will give them a future and not condemn them to be closed down. I mean, what Salim is doing is really the interesting thing, but Indian people are still so unbelievably respectful of tradition, which is a wonderful thing, that they will not change it, which is not a wonderful thing.
You see the mischievous spirit of the covenant. It's there.
Yes, you have.
You had a question.
I do. Thank you so much for today. My question is that we've heard a lot about how cultures have really influenced your designs. We also heard about Ayurvedic medicine. I'm wondering, are there other kind of industries or specializations that have influenced you as you've designed these collections? Thank you.
Could you hear it? Did you hear the question?
You hear the question?
Salim and Hemant, did you hear the question?
If I'm not mistaken, I heard if we often have other inspirations beside our culture. I mean, I personally have not taken the traditional route on fashion. I digged in my mom's closet, like not just within the craft, but I am so inspired by the silhouettes and the cuts of how people dressed in the village, how they live their simple lives, like less is more, like these kind of things that are engraved in my subconscious that I do in my design without actually thinking about them. I, of course, look and I love and I admire a lot of designers and I look up to their work, but my inspiration comes from within, I must say, and there is so much, like as an artist, I often think like, what do I want to convey and what do I want to tell? So it's often about like the story that I want to share and how does it fit within the universe of the brand. We're obviously all inspired, but there's so many pretty things out there. But I try to keep my inspirations away from the fashion, the trends, like the runways kind of thing, which I think makes the product unique and, you know, very consistent with my story and my vision and where I come from.
Well, I've been blessed with an extremely international life, living in many different countries and speaking many different languages. So I honestly don't know anymore what is only me or what is only something else. And we have always been inspired by extreme travel, I would say, by going not only to other countries, but also to different times and to change logics and just to interpret a kind of an inspiration. And I think it's absolutely logical because well, you take all kinds of elements and you make a nice, interesting cocktail out of it. And if it speaks to your heart, it's okay.
Yeah.
My instinct and my approach is every culture has something to give you. We just need to focus on the similarities of the cultures rather than the differences of the culture. Like some of their heart-shaped designs on ikat in Uzbekistan is exactly like the Sacred Heart in Mexico. And it's mind-boggling. You find so many similarities, but all these borders are political borders. I mean, we all share so much culturally that we need to focus on the similarities and the common points rather than the divisions. We leave the divisions to the politicians.
Yeah. Amen.
I can just quote a collection that we did coming back from Norway, which was inspired by Norwegian pullovers. We used kind of techniques that we interpreted as Norwegian, but they were all Maharaja motifs from Hyderabad. So there you are. It's Norwegian Hyderabad. Well, that doesn't mean anything. It just means that it was really something inspired by different sources, and it's really interesting.
Thank you all.
I would like to build up on the question that was just asked, actually, again, to the three designers amongst us. We're in an art fair, contemporary art, and with the sources of inspiration come from tradition. And again, fashion is art, and art is connected clearly, but the result is very different. Do you find inspiration, the three designers, in contemporary art also when you design, or vice versa, the designers?
I think you can find inspiration everywhere if you don't look but to see. You know, you need to see, not just to look. I think you will find inspiration in nature. Nature, I mean, my color combination comes from nature. I look at one flower and I say how many colors, the green goes with orange. Okay, I'm gonna combine green with orange. So inspiration is everywhere, like geometric shapes, the furniture, architecture, modern art, contemporary art. So it's just we need to open our eyes and see it. Be curious.
If you actually analyze the word modern, it actually means that it does not come from tradition. And the interesting thing is the clash of the two. When you have something which is purely created, like the Bauhaus, for example, which will meet traditional architecture like the Taj Mahal, that's two really different sources because one is modern and one is traditional.
Yeah.
So inspired by Jeff Koons, obviously it's wonderful, but also by something really traditional from Khajuraho.
We've got only 3 minutes to go, so any other question from anyone here? Or any last comment from you, Salim and Hemant, online?
Thank you very much for having me and to participate here from New Delhi.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
I enjoyed this discussion.
It was definitely a very interesting discussion. I thank you all for joining us in the public, but here on stage, Hemant, Salim, thank you very much for joining from two parts of Asia and sharing your experience. And of course, Sylvie here and Aurélie and the accidental designer, Nazi. Thank you very much. Okay. Have a good day, everyone. For those here, I'm sorry you're not with us, Salim and Hemant, to see this amazing display of contemporary art that is here. But for those who are here, please continue seeing these amazing pieces and have a beautiful day.